If you're using Obsidian to take notes or just store them on your computer, and that's all you're doing, honestly, it's probably overkill. And there are some better alternatives if that's all you're trying to do. So why alternatives? First of all, Obsidian is powerful. There's no getting around that. It's got a ton of plugins, features, and a large community. A lot of people like it, but also it's kind of a lot. And over the years, it's grown. They've added a bunch of features that most people are probably not using, but you're going to have to deal with them somehow if you're using the app. And so for me, at least, it was time to take a second look at why I had started to use Obsidian, what was I using it for, and if it was still worth using in 2026 with so many other options available. So if all you want is Markdown plus local files, I think there are some better options. So I tried a bunch of apps, rated them, and these are my top 5 picks. What I was looking for, first of all, is going into this, that there is no best Markdown app. There are just better apps based on your needs. I needed something really, really simple that just handles Markdown, displays it nicely, lets me organize my folders, and has a bunch of keyboard shortcuts and doesn't get in the way with a bunch of unnecessary features. So basically, less setup, less clutter, less tinkering than Obsidian, because while it is powerful, that also means it has a lot of baggage in terms of settings and plugins and things that you can kind of add to it. And over time, it becomes this giant monster where in the early days, it was just kind of Markdown and files and folders, which is what made it so nice. So the criteria I used to rate the apps was on their speed, their interface, and their experience. Those are kind of vague. So what I mean by speed is, can I open it and use it right away? Is there any setup, loading, or indexing before it becomes useful? I was really starting to run into that issue with Obsidian over time as I added more notes. The indexing time got to be pretty ridiculous. That's kind of really why I started looking at alternatives. If I was just using it for the Markdown and organizing my notes for, let's say, cold storage, why was it indexing? Why was it doing all these other things? And why did I need to add a bunch of plugins if I really wasn't using it for that? Next up is interface. So very broadly, is the interface clean? Is it easy to understand? Is it not cluttered with a bunch of buttons and options? Obviously, that's going to be very subjective, but I tried my best to be as neutral as possible in terms of, is the interface visually appealing? And also, is it easy to understand what the features are? So striking that balance between letting the user know these are the things you can do in the app, but also not displaying absolutely every single feature at all times. So kind of hard, especially with some of the apps that have a lot of features. And lastly, I looked at interface. Is it easy to quickly capture notes? Is it easy to edit and reorganize them? Very broadly, what is the experience of using the app? Does it feel nice to use? Is it clunky? Is it quick? Is it logical? Just the overall experience. So again, very broad categories, but I think good enough for purposes of this video. Also, I'm excluding a bunch of apps for various reasons, so maybe let's get into that a little bit. Any app that replaces Obsidian's complexity with new complexity was obviously excluded. I was looking for apps that keep things really, really simple. That's just based on my needs. So any app that added more complexity, either new complexity or just swapped it out for other complexity, didn't make the cut. And also any apps that weren't signed for Mac. And by that, it just means that the developer doesn't have an Apple developer account. They couldn't sign the app. And even though there are ways to get around that, that's not something that average users are going to do, because every time the app updates and you download and install the new update, you're going to have to go through the song and dance of giving it the permissions and all that. And so while it's fine for people that like to tinker with their computer, that's just not going to fly for anybody that uses apps in a much more normal way, where you open them and maybe you give it some permissions and then you expect it to just auto update and work forever. Doesn't quite work like that. So unfortunately, I had to exclude the apps that weren't signed for Mac. So this is the list. This isn't an exhaustive list. There are some notable omissions here like Tana and Logseq. The reason for that, Tana in particular, is because it has its own format. It's not keeping things simple. It's also not based on local files. They're on the web, which is fine, but that's not what I'm looking for in a Markdown app. And Logseq I excluded because even though it's been around for quite a while, I feel that it just takes Obsidian's complexities and replaces them with other complexities. So doesn't quite keep things simple. So that's why I excluded them. I didn't put them here just because they'd been around for much longer than these other apps. These are the new ones, the new kids on the block, especially Tolaria, which has got a lot of buzz recently. The reason I excluded it is because it answers the question, what if Obsidian were made by GitHub? So I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment, but as you can imagine, very busy, very cluttered, very feature dense, and that might be what you're looking for, but that's not the criteria that I'm using to grade the apps. So it's very interesting, but it's just a very different type of app. And this is what Tolaria looks like. This is the screenshot that they use to represent the app. As you can see, it's It's a lot. They've got a lot of features in here. Side panels, tags, a lot of highlighting, all the buttons and everything is kind of available. If you look at the bottom of the app, it could be confused very easily for some sort of a code editor. And so it's very interesting what they're doing here. I like it, but it's not what I'm looking for in terms of a simple Markdown app that's just Markdown files and folders for storing notes long-term on my computer. So pretty cool, but just not what we're looking for. There was also Marky, which is available for Mac and Linux. Here's what it looks like. Pretty interesting, pretty simple. It's got the two panels on the side, kind of reminiscent of Obsidian. Unfortunately, it's not signed for Mac, so that's why I didn't include it. Also, the last commit, the last change that was pushed to it was 2 months ago, so maybe kind of inactive, especially for a brand new note-taking app. Next up was LibreMD, which is just available for Windows. I'm on Mac, I don't have access to a Windows machine, so unfortunately I wasn't able to test it, but it looks kind of interesting if you are on a Windows machine. It's got a kind of a old school approach to Markdown editing, which is where they split the different views. On the one side, we've got the Markdown with all the syntax for it, and on another side, we've got the preview or the reading mode, as some of these apps call it. So kind of interesting, but unfortunately it was Windows only, so I was unable to test it. Still want to mention it in case you are a Windows user and it is interesting to you. It looks pretty clean. There was also Clearly, which is just for Mac. This one was super frustrating, and I'll show you in just a moment what I mean, but basically I think I'm dumb because I couldn't get it to work, and I could never get it to open more than a single file, which is very surprising. This is the app that I had the most trouble with. It honestly looks like the one that has some of the most polish in terms of the landing page and the app, and I think there's also even an iPhone app for it. So it looks pretty good. It leans very heavily into the Mac aesthetic, at least the early 2000s Mac aesthetic, especially with some of these little panels that you would open to edit things. It's kind of a more old school at this point Mac design language, but it's still pretty nice. Unfortunately, every time I opened it, I would get this view, which is the main view, which is how you can capture quick notes. You can have it in an edit view or in a preview view. So basically these two views right here. And that's it. So the screenshots clearly show you can do more things with it, like having a sidebar where you've got access to all the folders and the files. For the life of me, I could not figure it out. I went through every single setting. I looked through the documentation. There's a way to do it, I'm sure. I couldn't figure it out. If you do know how to make it work, let me know in the comments, because it's not obvious to me. And I think I even looked through all the keyboard shortcuts, couldn't figure it out. So looks interesting, Mac only. I just couldn't get it to work. So for that reason, unfortunately, I had to exclude it. There was also Interpreter, which is available on every system. The problem with this one was it's huge. It's 2.5 gigs in size. It's very AI focused. It's about 2/3 IDE or AI and only like 1/3 Notes app. Let me just show you very quickly what it looks like. It's pretty interesting. So it's about being able to dump all your notes in here, and then you're using AI to parse all that, organize it in a much more logical way, so then you can use more AI on top of it and use that context to generate other things, presentations, documents, Excel sheets, all kinds of things. So pretty interesting. I tried it out because it was free if you bring your own API keys. Unfortunately, it was just too AI focused, very little in terms of a notes app, much more of an AI app. And lastly, I excluded Otterly and Glyph for the same reason. They're not signed for Mac, so I can't test them, because even if they do work pretty well, I know other people are not going to jump through the hoops necessary to keep these apps up to date and deal with that, or even just get them to work the first time around. So I had to exclude them. But I do want to show them to you just because they seem pretty interesting, especially Otterly. If you're looking for Obsidian minus Obsidian, if that makes sense, then Otterly seems like a pretty interesting choice. Looking at the left sidebar, that strip here, it looks very, very much like I could just be looking at a screenshot of Obsidian. The difference obviously is that this is open source, so you can actually look at the code, unlike Obsidian, and make changes and things like that. So yeah, if you're looking for just Obsidian without Obsidian, then Otterly might be one to look at. And Glyph was the last one I had to exclude. Kind of surprising. The landing page looks really professional. It looks like an app that's been around for quite a while, and so you'd think they'd have their ducks all in a row. Unfortunately, when I downloaded it from Mac, it wasn't signed, so I couldn't open it. Again, I would have to go through the song and dance of making it work on my machine, which I know other people are probably not going to be willing to do. So even if I recommend it, you're not going to really use it. So that's why I excluded it. So that's every app I excluded for the various reasons. Now let's get into the actual top 5 apps that I recommend, and there's something for all operating systems. So let's just get right to it. And we're starting with my number 5 pick, which is MiaoYan. It's a Mac-only app, and in my very simple rating system, it scored a 12 out of 15, the lowest score, but still pretty good. And we're going to go through it now, why I gave it that score. So one nice thing that I noted about it is it automatically puts its files in the iCloud folder. So while it doesn't support its own database somewhere in the cloud to sync your files across machines, it does try to initially put everything in iCloud. So when you open it up on another machine, you'll be able to pull from that single folder. Speed scored a 5 out of 5, opened instantly. One tiny nitpick is it doesn't remember the last open note, but in terms of just being able to use it and just being very quick about capturing notes, opening, navigating, super fast, no problems there. Interface, I gave it a 3 out of 5. It has various ways to view the notes, including a kind of a presentation mode. I'll show that in just a moment. And in terms of experience, I gave it a 4 out of 5. It supports moving files into folders. It automatically keeps version history, and it's very bare bones feature-wise, which actually for me is a plus. There's less settings to tinker with endlessly and less features to fiddle with constantly. So anything that keeps things simple was a plus for me. So here's MiaoYan. On the left, we've got a sidebar with the various Markdown files. You can just click on them to open them up in the main view. We have a couple of different ways of kind of having the main view of the app. We can have it with the folders on the left side, and then the notes, and then the main content. This is, I feel, kind of like the traditional way that some of the older Markdown editing apps used to handle things. Another app that comes to mind that does this is IA Writer, where they have the folders on the far left sidebar, and then they've got the actual contents of the folder, and then on the very far right, they have the actual document that you're looking at. Unfortunately, there is no live preview, so you have to toggle either splitting the views of the content with the Markdown formatting on one side, and then the actual rendered Markdown on the other side, or I believe there's also like this just single reading mode where you just see the Markdown nicely formatted. And that's pretty much it. There really are not many features to speak of. You've got the different ways to view your notes, kind of like in maybe a Zen mode, if you want to think of it that way, to read or to edit. And then this is the presentation mode, which takes over the entire screen. I don't know if the recording software that I'm using is actually going to capture it, but basically it just takes over the screen and you get to see the Markdown rendered nicely. So that's kind of an interesting feature I didn't see anywhere else. And so in terms of files and folders, handling them well, being very quick, really nice. The reason it didn't score quite as highly as some of the other apps is because of this split view. I really don't like that we have ways to have the Markdown be displayed, nicely formatted, and also let you edit it without having to go back and forth between the two different views. But maybe you're someone that prefers it this way. So if so, this is an excellent option. My number 4 pick was Cogito. It is Mac only, and it scored a 12 out of 15. Pretty solid option. Again, no live preview. Speed-wise, it's 5 out of 5. It opens instantly and it remembers the last open note, which MiaoYan does not, so it's got a leg up on that. Interface-wise, 3 out of 5. Pretty clean. Definitely more visible buttons than some of these other apps, but they're pretty unintrusive because of the color scheme they use. So even though it's got a lot of buttons, they're not really that obvious, so that's not too bad. And no live Markdown preview. It uses the 2 modes, just like MiaoYan. Experience-wise, 4 out of 5. It imports some Obsidian settings. That was pretty interesting. The first time I opened it, it asked me if I wanted to import the file sort order and also my favorite bookmarks. I don't know if it imports other things if you use Obsidian a lot, but it's pretty interesting to see. One thing that stands out about Cogito is it's got this AI sidebar, which lets you connect various AI providers to your notes. So if you're already someone that's using AI in some capacity to organize your notes, proofread, edit, generate, whatever it might be, that just makes it a little bit easier. It brings that interface into the note-taking app instead of having it be a separate thing. Maybe you're running Claude Cowork or you're using some AI agent as a command line interface and you're pointing it at your notes and using it that way. This just makes that a little bit easier. One last thing I do want to mention, it has a very tight integration with this blogging social media platform called Typefully. The developer of this app also is a developer of Typefully, and so there's a lot of tight integration between those two apps. You don't need to use Typefully to use Cogito, but just letting you know that there is that option. Here's what the app looks like. We've got the traditional left-hand sidebar where we've got the folders and the files, and we can click into them. I just realized that actually it tracks the Markdown for tasks and will display this little ring that kind of fills up as you complete them in the notes. So if you happen to use to-dos in your Markdown, this will actually display that for you in the sidebar, which I thought was just kind of a nice touch. As I mentioned before, there is no live preview. We're looking at the Markdown. formatting here, and we need to click into it or use the keyboard shortcut to now view the formatted mode or the reading mode, which of course we can't edit. So that for me was unfortunately the major deal breaker, because there are other apps that can do both. So still pretty good if you prefer to work just in Markdown and then know that the formatting is available for whatever reason, then this is another great option to look at. We can also take a look at the outline, and I'm sure we can just click to navigate around. We can also open this file anywhere else that supports a Markdown, like text editors or code editors. And we also have that AI sidebar. So now it's checking for local agents. I don't remember if I actually set it up or not. But anyway, this is just kind of like having ChatGPT or Claude Code inside of your notes. And so it should already be pointed at the folder and the notes. And I think you could probably do something like at. So there we go, at, and then you just mention which specific note you want to ask about. And it seems like it's also able to perform the edit. So if you're using AI with your Markdown notes, this might be a really nice option because it just puts everything in a single package. You don't have to deal with two apps open at the same time. You can just edit the notes manually here, ask the AI to do stuff on your notes, and if you don't like it, then you can manually go in there without having to go back and forth across apps. So kind of a nice touch if you use AI. And I think it also does some other things, like it's giving me a summary. Oh, and it also connects to Apple Intelligence, which I wasn't aware of. I don't use it personally, but if you do, that's an additional option. Gives you some stats, some interesting stuff in there. So it definitely checks all the boxes for me. It handles Markdown files and folders very well. The one nitpick for me is that it doesn't have live preview, but otherwise you do get a ton of options. And if you use AI with your notes, you can also integrate that. This is the Typefully thing I was mentioning. So you add your API key here and connect it, and then you can do things on their platform. Like I said, it has to do with social media, so publishing to LinkedIn, X, and all that stuff. But I don't think you actually need to have that to use it. You can just use it as a Markdown app. Definitely a solid option if you're on Mac. Moving from number 4 to number 3, we have the most interesting Markdown app that I reviewed, which is called LibreMD Editor Viewer. And if the name alone doesn't give it away, it's definitely got its own unique take on a Markdown editor. What's nice is that it's available on every single platform. It is also probably the smallest application out of all of them, and it scored a 13 out of 15. It's got a really unique approach. Visually, it's kind of odd, but I can definitely see how it might be perfect for some users. And we'll get into why that is in just a moment. Additionally, it's the most works anywhere app of any of the apps on the list. There is a version of it that's basically a single HTML file that runs in whatever browser you have on the computer, and that's your editor. So I'll show that in just a moment, but it's really interesting. Speed-wise, 5 out of 5. No setup. You literally just point it at a folder and off it goes. The app can be a single HTML file, and the interface is kind of busy. A lot of toggles, a lot of buttons. Everything is exposed and available. So like I said, I can see how for some people that might be really, really good. For me, it's just way too much, but I do appreciate what it's trying to do. That means it's very clear about all the features that are available because they're available all the time. The biggest issue for me was, like with the other apps, it doesn't have live preview, and the top apps do. So for me, there's really no reason to be using that split mode where you've got the Markdown on one side and then the formatted text on the other side, when there are apps that can handle having it in one single view. Experience-wise, 0 issues. It's really weird in a charming way, and it lets me move files around. And I've mentioned that with some of the other apps. The reason why is, well, you would think that it's obvious. You want to be able to have files moving around the different folders. Some of the apps, including one of the top apps, doesn't currently let you do that, which is kind of wild, but it still scores pretty highly for other reasons. So I did want to mention it because not every single Markdown editing app lets you do that. So yeah, just something I thought I would mention. And here's what it looks like. So as you can see, very striking, very different. It's got a bunch of toggles. It's kind of chunky. Pretty much all the views are available right here. There are some additional settings, but that's pretty much it. This is just an HTML file in the browser, and I've already pointed it at a local folder. This is the same one I've been using to test all the other apps. And let's just go into this one right here. Here are the folders. I click into one of these, and it's got that same split view thing going on. So I'm just gonna turn off folder. We've got the Markdown on one side. We've got the formatted view on the other side. And that's pretty much it. But it works, and it works really well. It's really simple. One additional thing about this, and the reason why I think for some people this is gonna be exactly what they need, is because it's all one single HTML file, That means you can use any AI agent to very, very quickly change anything about the way the app looks, the way it works, the features, because it's kind of just a web app that runs in a single file. So that makes it really simple to edit and change things. You could customize it to fit your needs perfectly, then drop it in a flash drive, put it on a keychain, carry that with you, and then have access to your preferred Markdown editor anywhere, because it's an HTML file, so it's going to run every single operating system. So definitely a very interesting approach. I do appreciate it. I wouldn't use it personally just because of the lack of the live preview and the overall aesthetic choices, but I do find it very charming, very interesting, super portable. So that's why I included it on the list in spot number 3. Coming in at number 2 is Writer.computer. Unfortunately, it is Mac only, but it does score very highly, and I promise my top pick is available on all operating systems. So the reasons I picked it are it's clean, it's quick, it's minimal. Speed-wise, 5 out of 5, opens instantly, remembers last location, just covers all the bases really, really well. The interface gets a 5 out of 5. It's clean, minimal, I already mentioned that. One tiny nitpick, I'm not a fan of the counts that it has on each page for the words, the sentences, and the overall length, I think. See it in just a moment. But as far as I could tell, there's no way to get rid of that. That's also available on Obsidian, but in Obsidian, you can get rid of it. Experience-wise, 4 out of 5, keyboard shortcuts for pretty much everything. There is one small issue, which is pretty annoying, but I could definitely overlook it because it does have the live Markdown editing. So those are like the 2 big things for me, being able to quickly move notes around, edit them, but also just the writing experience. And the writing experience is so good, I'm willing to overlook the fact that you can't move files. Even so, I gave it a 4 out of 5, so it's not a perfect score, and that's why it's not in position number 1. I actually reached out to the creator on X, and he told me that the feature would be coming sometime soon. So at that point, it's definitely going to be in tie for position number 1. Even so, it looks really good. It's really clean. You can quickly switch to different folders, very much the way you can in Obsidian. And on the left-hand side, you've got the sidebar with all your folders. You can click into these, open up the different files. And then we've got the live editing. So as you can see, when I click on any one of these lines or just move my cursor, it switches from the nice formatting to the actual raw Markdown. So I can quickly edit it, see what the format is, make changes, and I don't have to switch back and forth from different views. I can just preview it nicely formatted the way it's going to go out into the world, and also tweak it if I want to. So pretty simple. At the very top, we've got the option to open up multiple files. There is no split view or anything like that, but you can quickly jump from one file to another. This is what I was mentioning that I'm not a big fan of, but it's fine. It's such a tiny thing. You get the word count, the character count, and the paragraphs. If you hover over this thing right here, you get the outline. You can click on it to zoom into that section. And that's pretty much it. You've got a couple of settings here where we can change some of the preferences, light mode, dark mode, the width of some of the things, the accent colors. Pretty basic. Honestly, I don't need much else. This is good enough. There's no option for built-in AI or tracking file changes automatically or through GitHub like some of the other apps. So it's pretty simple in terms of what it does. It just displays the Markdown files and folders in a nice format. You can quickly edit them and preview them, and that's pretty much it. It's just like a really nice file viewer, which is really what I was looking for when I started looking at all the options available with these new Markdown apps. The reason why it's not in top position is just for that issue that I cannot move my files around, which is something that to me feels pretty basic. Hopefully the developer adds the ability to move the files around in the different folders. Once that is in the app, I think this is probably going to be my number 1 pick. But now let's actually go into the real current number 1 pick, which is Scratch, and it's available on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and it falls just short of a perfect score in my wacky system. Speed-wise, 5 out of 5. Very quick to open, 0 setup. I gave the interface a 5 out of 5, even though it does have a lot of toolbars by default, but they're very easy to hide using the keyboard shortcut to enter focus mode, so I didn't feel I could really fault it for that. For people that are maybe not as comfortable or familiar with all the different Markdown options, having all of that available in a toolbar in case you forget what it is or how to do it or what options are available is kind of nice. Experience-wise, it's a 4 out of 5. It supports moving files, which is something that Writer.computer doesn't. One thing that is holding it back from getting a perfect score is the AI interface. That is the weakest point. Cogito, as we saw, had that right-hand sidebar where you can connect it to various tools like the ones from OpenAI and Anthropic, and I think Google as well. And it's available, and it just brings the AI capabilities inside the note-taking app. It's kind of familiar. It's like a chat interface, and you can see the history of the chat, and then you can see the edits in the app. The way that Scratch does it is very different. It's really, really basic, and I just don't really enjoy it. So let me show you what it looks like. We have the left-hand sidebar, and then we can open up the different files and the folders, navigate them. This is the toolbar that I was talking about. We've got all the different options. They teach you the keyboard shortcuts. This is starting to look a little bit busy for me, but the way that I would actually use it is in focus mode, where it kind of gets rid of everything. So it's not that big of a deal. And once we're in focus mode, everything kind of disappears. The sidebar goes away, the toolbar goes away. We're in the live preview mode, so anything that you write in Markdown is going to be formatted correctly. One issue though is that you can't go the other way around. So with Writer.computer, if you clicked on the line, like for example, this is obviously heading, you would see the Markdown and then you could edit it. You can't really do that in Scratch. Once you've created the Markdown, you can view it and then add on top of it, but you can't undo it. So for example, if I do something like hashtag, this is a heading, it's got the H1 format, but if I click into it, there's no way to get rid of it or to view what the formatting is. I could obviously use the keyboard shortcuts to change it, but you can't go back. So while it is a live preview, it's not as nice as I would like. And while in most situations, this isn't going to be that big of an issue, you just select the thing and then you learn the keyboard shortcut and then that's how you change it. Really, it's about being able to write very quickly in Markdown and seeing it formatted nicely. But if you want to view the Markdown and then edit it, there's not really an easy way to do that from here. That doesn't mean you can't. So the way we do that is by exiting full screen mode, and then there's this option here called Markdown Source, which has its own keyboard shortcut. And now we've got access to the raw Markdown. We can make all the changes. It gets rid of the live preview, but it's kind of this balance between if you just want to view the Markdown, edit it that way, and then make some smaller changes, then you get rid of it, and this is the mode you would work in. And I don't know how big of an issue that's going to be for some people. Personally, I don't think it's that big of an issue. And the reason why Scratch is in spot number 1 and not Writer.computer is because this is available on every single operating system and Writer.computer is not. So it really does check all the boxes, even though there are still some issues and nitpicks about the way it handles some things that I maybe would prefer from other apps. But overall, I think it's a very solid choice. Let me just show you very briefly the AI thing that I was talking about this is the one thing I really didn't like. So for example, I just hit a keyboard shortcut to open up the command palette, and then I search for my AI agent of choice, and then you describe the edit. So unlike Cogito, where you have the panel on the right side, you can kind of have a conversation just like you would with ChatGPT or Claude Code, and you have that context of what you told the AI, and then you can see the changes, and then you can go back and forth. Here it's kind of a one-shot thing. So summarize it in 3 bullet points, and then it's opaque what's happening. Codex is editing your note, and then when it's done, you see the result, or you would see the result. In this case, I got an error because I used this machine to do a lot of testing on different AI products and things, and so now I've got clashes going on between the different agents and tools. But anyway, what you would get here is a preview, like a summary of the agent did such and such. Then you would just see the changes that it's made, and you can hit Control-Z or Command-Z to undo it, or just accept it. But that's it. There's no history of the instructions. So if you want to make multiple changes, if you're going to be iterating back and forth with AI, this is definitely not the platform to do it. So it's kind of nice that they have the option for very simple things, but the way that they've implemented it just feels like a step backwards. So if you're not using AI, definitely go with Scratch. If you are, probably go with something else, or just don't use their AI feature because it's not very good right now. Another feature it does have that is better than the AI is version control. So you can turn that on, and you can use a GitHub to host all the changes for your notes, back up everything. It's kind of built into the app if you want to do that. If you're not already using Dropbox or Google Drive or iCloud or something else, then you can use GitHub, and this is already built into the app. Other than that, pretty standard stuff. You can choose the AI providers, you can tweak the appearance a little bit, teach you all the shortcuts. That's pretty much it. Very minimal, very simple, just has all the options available. So if you're someone who is not very comfortable with Markdown, or you're trying to get someone to move over from Word or Google Docs into Markdown, then this is definitely a good option, especially with the toolbar, just to make it feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more friendly for people that maybe aren't used to writing in Markdown. For those reasons, and the fact that it's available on every operating system, this is my top pick. And that is it. If you're looking for a simple Markdown app to replace Obsidian, you can't go wrong with any of these options. I would honestly stick to just the first three unless you have a specific reason for going with Cogito, like maybe you want that additional AI functionality built in, or you just really like the aesthetic choices of MiaoYan. I would honestly just stick to one of these three. If you happen to use Mac, I would go with Writer.computer. If you don't, go with Scratch. And if you want to have absolute control over your Markdown editor, offline MD editor viewer is the one I would recommend. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.